In 1515, a woman named Margaret Schmidt was dragged into a Nuremberg dungeon. She screamed, preferring to burn at the stake than face what awaited her inside. Yet, within just 6 hours, she begged her captors to end her life. That, unsettlingly, isn't even the worst part of her story. Margaret encountered a device so psychologically devastating, so profoundly cruel, that even hardened criminals confessed to crimes they never committed, simply to avoid it. It was a machine designed to shatter the strongest minds without spilling a single drop of blood. And here lies the twisted irony. The Church itself considered it an act of mercy. This tale, historians later tried to bury. But its psychological techniques, born from medieval nightmares, continue to spark debate among interrogation experts even today. It reveals 3 shocking truths: a device prisoners chose death over, a torture method that broke human minds in mere hours, and the disturbing reason it was deemed merciful. To truly grasp the horror, picture medieval Europe in the 15th and 16th centuries. Justice then wasn't about rehabilitation. It was about extracting confessions, and both church and state had perfected what they called enhanced interrogation. However, what many don't realise is that by this era, torturers had discovered something far more effective than breaking bones or burning flesh. They learned the human mind was infinitely more fragile than the human body. Physical torture, you see, had clear limitations. A person could pass out, go into shock, or simply die before yielding their secrets. But psychological torture, that could go on indefinitely, with the victim remaining conscious, acutely aware through every agonizing moment. Authorities desperately needed confessions for witch trials, heresy charges, and political conspiracies. These confessions had to be detailed, specific, and often implicating others. Traditional methods produced too many deaths and not enough useful information. So they innovated. What emerged was a device that would forever redefine human suffering. It did not rely on pain. Instead, it tapped into something far more primitive, far more terrifying, the human imagination. Today we explore the torture device that made grown men weep before it even touched them, that caused women to confess to witchcraft within hours, that broke the human spirit so completely victims would literally beg for death as a mercy. This is the story of the Iron Maiden, but not the version you think you know. What I'm about to tell you will change how you understand both medieval justice and the darkest corners of human psychology. The machine awaiting Margaret Schmidt in that Nuremberg dungeon wasn't designed to kill her quickly. Picture this scene. You stand in a cold stone chamber, torches flickering against damp ancient walls. Before you looms what appears to be a metal coffin, roughly human-shaped, with a face carved into its surface. This face is not serene. It is twisted into an expression of eternal agony. The executioner opens the front panel, revealing the interior. It is lined with iron spikes. But here's the untold truth about the Iron Maiden's true horror. Those spikes were never designed to kill you quickly. Hans Schmidt, no relation to our victim Margaret, served as the executioner of Nuremberg from 1501 to 1532. His personal diary reveals a terrifying truth. The spikes were carefully measured and positioned. They would indeed pierce the body when the door closed, but they were precisely placed to avoid vital organs. The points enter the flesh at the shoulders, chest and legs, Schmidt wrote, but the condemned can survive for many hours, perhaps even days if we are careful with the placement. The physical pain, however, was not the worst part. It was the waiting. Imagine being locked inside this metal coffin, unable to move, with iron spikes pressed firmly against your skin. Every breath you take pushes those spikes slightly deeper. Every heartbeat sends waves of agonizing pain through your body. You cannot see anything, you cannot move, you can only wait. And here lies the psychological masterstroke. Before sealing the door, the executioner would describe in vivid detail exactly what was about to happen. He would explain how the spikes would slowly, inevitably, work their way deeper with each breath. How your own body would become your torturer. He would then add that you could end this suffering at any time by simply confessing. Schmidt's diary reveals that most prisoners broke within the very first hour. Not from physical pain, but from the crushing mental anguish of anticipating what was coming next. Margaret Schmidt confessed to Congress with the devil after 2 hours in the Maiden, Hans wrote. She provided names of 17 other witches and begged for immediate execution. But this story takes an even darker turn. The authorities in Nuremberg, ever innovating, discovered something that would make the traditional Iron Maiden seem like child's play. They made one crucial modification, transforming a mere torture device into a machine that could break the human mind in ways that still horrify psychologists today. The modification was simple, yet diabolical. They added small viewing holes to the Iron Maiden's face, allowing the victim to see out into the chamber. Why would they do this? Because they discovered that complete sensory deprivation was not the most effective psychological torture. Partial sensory input was far, far worse. Through these holes, prisoners could watch other victims being tortured. They could see the executioner calmly preparing his gruesome tools. They could even observe the faces of the crowd that had gathered to witness their suffering. But crucially, they couldn't participate, couldn't scream effectively, couldn't truly beg for mercy. The Spanish Inquisition records from Toledo, preserved in their archives from 1478 to 1834, document the chilling effectiveness of this psychological torment. The heretic Maria Gonzalez was placed in the viewing Iron Maiden at the hour of prime, reads one entry from 1487. By the hour of terce, she had confessed to heretical practices. By the hour of sext, she had provided the names of her accomplices. By evening prayer, she was begging the guards to end her torment through any means necessary. That, readers, is a complete psychological breakdown in less than 6 hours. But here's what nobody tells you about why this technique was so devastatingly effective. It exploited a fundamental aspect of human psychology, one we now understand through modern neuroscience. When you can see but cannot act, when you can observe but cannot participate, your brain enters a state of learned helplessness that is far more damaging than any physical pain. You become a prisoner not just of the device, but of your own mind. Dr. Margaret Rothsky, a modern psychologist who has studied historical torture methods, explained it this way. The viewing holes created a paradox of awareness. The victim was simultaneously isolated and exposed, hidden and observed. This cognitive dissonance can break the human psyche faster than any physical trauma. The Inquisition records further show that prisoners in the viewing Iron Maiden would often provide not just confessions, but detailed accusations against family members, friends, and neighbours. Anything, absolutely anything, to make the psychological torment stop. But don't click away yet, because what happened next made the viewing Iron Maiden seem merciful by comparison. The church authorities, always seeking more humane methods of extracting confessions, developed a version that prisoners would literally fight each other for the chance to experience. In 1523, Pope Adrian VI issued a papal bull authorising what the church called the Iron Maiden of Mercy. This document, preserved within the Vatican secret archives, reveals the truly twisted logic behind this so-called improvement. The merciful version astonishingly eliminated the spikes entirely. At first glance, this seems like genuine progress. A torture device without the torture. Yet, the church had discovered something far more sinister. They had unearthed the terrifying power of pure psychological warfare. Picture yourself being locked inside a metal coffin in complete suffocating darkness. You are unable to move, with just enough air to survive. There are no spikes threatening to pierce your flesh, no immediate physical danger, just waiting. The papal authorization documents reveal the diabolic psychology behind this design. The sinner, it states, faced with the prospect of indefinite confinement in darkness, will contemplate their sins and seek absolution through truthful confession. But here's the horrifying reality. Prisoners in the merciful Iron Maiden would experience complete sensory deprivation combined with the crushing psychological terror of not knowing when or if they would ever be released. Brother Francesco de Marco, a monk who administered this torture in Rome, kept detailed records of its effectiveness. His journals described prisoners who would begin hallucinating within mere hours. They would hear voices of deceased family members. They would see demons in the oppressive darkness. They would confess to crimes that existed only in their fractured minds. Lorenzo Medici, suspected of heresy, was placed in the Maiden of Mercy at dawn, De Marco wrote. By midday he was weeping. By evening he was speaking to his dead mother. By the following dawn he had confessed to practicing witchcraft, though no evidence of such practices existed. The most disturbing aspect? Prisoners who had experienced both versions, the spiked maiden and the merciful version, would actually beg to be put back in the spiked Iron Maiden. The physical pain, they declared, was preferable to the mental anguish. "The pain of the spikes is nothing compared to the pain of the mind," wrote one prisoner in a letter smuggled out of a papal prison. "At least with the spikes, you know your suffering has a limit. In the darkness, your suffering has no end." The Church considered this progress because no blood was shed, no bones were broken, and technically no physical harm was inflicted. They genuinely believed they had created a humane method of extracting confessions. But here's what nobody tells you about the final, most disturbing truth behind the Iron Maiden. The discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about medieval torture. Are you ready for the most shocking revelation of all? The Iron Maiden was often completely empty. Archaeological excavations of medieval torture chambers across Europe have revealed something historians tried to keep quiet for decades. Many of the Iron Maidens found in castle dungeons and Inquisition chambers show no evidence of ever being used. No bloodstains on the spikes, no wear patterns from struggling prisoners, no scratch marks from fingernails clawing at the interior. What they found instead were elaborate mechanisms designed to create sound effects. Dr. Heinrich Müller, who led excavations at Nuremberg Castle in 1987, discovered a series of pulleys, bells, and echo chambers built directly into the Iron Maiden's base. When activated, these mechanisms could simulate the sounds of a prisoner trapped inside, groaning, pleading, even the chilling sound of spikes penetrating flesh. The ultimate psychological torture wasn't physical at all, it was pure theatre. Here's how it worked. A prisoner would be brought into the torture chamber and shown the Iron Maiden. They would hear testimonies from previous victims, actually paid actors, describing the horrors they had supposedly endured. They would then listen to the realistic sounds of someone being tortured inside the device. Finally, they would be told they could avoid this horrific fate by confessing immediately, or they could experience it themselves. The confession rate, shockingly, was over 90%. The Spanish Inquisition perfected this technique, creating what they called theatres of confession. Entire chambers designed to break prisoners psychologically before any physical torture ever began. This discovery fundamentally changed how historians understand medieval justice. The period we thought was characterized by brutal physical torture was actually far more sophisticated and far more sinister. These weren't just torturers, they were psychological warfare experts. The techniques developed for the Iron Maiden directly influenced modern interrogation methods. Think of the good cop, bad cop routine, the use of intense psychological pressure instead of physical force, the creation of false scenarios to extract confessions. Military psychologists studying these medieval records helped develop interrogation techniques used in World War II, the Cold War, and even modern counter-terrorism operations. But here's the most disturbing consequence of all. The false confessions extracted through this Iron Maiden theatre helped fuel the European witch trials. Thousands of innocent people were executed based on confessions obtained through pure psychological manipulation. The device that was supposed to reveal truth instead created elaborate lies. It turned neighbours against neighbours, families against themselves, and entire communities into instruments of persecution. The Iron Maiden disappeared from European torture chambers by the late 16th century, not because it was deemed inhumane, but because authorities eventually realised that confessions obtained through such psychological manipulation were often useless for actual criminal investigations. Yet its legacy lived on in ways that still shape our world today. The Iron Maiden taught us something terrifying about human nature, that our minds are far more fragile than our bodies, and that the most devastating torture requires no physical violence at all. This device changed the nature of justice forever, transforming confession from an act of conscience into a product of psychological manipulation. It showed that fear could be manufactured, that guilt could be implanted, and that the truth could be shaped by those who controlled the narrative. Today we are still grappling with these lessons. False confessions remain a leading cause of wrongful convictions. Psychological interrogation techniques continue to evolve, and the line between justice and psychological coercion remains frighteningly thin. The Iron Maiden may be gone, but its shadow still falls across our legal systems, our understanding of human psychology, and our definitions of what constitutes humane treatment. So here's my question for you, and truly think about this before you answer. Given what we know